I left my husband for my ex. I thought I was chasing passion, something exciting, something more, but I was wrong. 3 months later, I was alone, pregnant and abandoned. The man I thought loved me disappeared, and the man I betrayed, he was moving on. When I showed up at his doorstep, holding a baby that wasn't his, I expected anger, hatred, maybe even the door slammed in my face. But what he did instead shocked me. The biggest mistake of my life. If you had told me a year ago that I would leave my husband, run back to my ex, and then return, this time with a baby in my arms, I would have laughed in your face. But life has a cruel way of humbling us. And this is my story. The perfect marriage, or so I thought. My husband, Daniel, was everything a woman could ask for. Kind, supportive, stable. Our life together was quiet, predictable, maybe too predictable. Then there was Jason, my ex, my first love. The kind of love that burns hot, dangerous, and all-consuming. He was the past I thought I had buried, but deep down, he had never really left my heart. And that's what led me to the biggest mistake of my life. The temptation that ruined everything. It started with a message. Hey, long time no see. I should have ignored it. I should have deleted it and never looked back. But I didn't. I replied, and that one message turned into long conversations, then late-night calls, then meetings in secret. Jason reminded me of who I used to be, carefree, wild, passionate. He made me feel alive in a way my quiet, steady marriage never did. So one night, I packed a bag. I told Daniel I needed space, that I wasn't happy, that I needed to figure things out. And just like that, I walked away from the man who had given me everything, for the one who had once broken me, the harsh reality of my choice. At first, it was thrilling. Jason and I picked up where we had left off, fiery, intense, like something out of a romance novel. But real life isn't a novel. The cracks showed quickly. Jason was still the same impulsive, reckless man he had always been. The passion was there, but so was the chaos. And then, 3 months in, I found out I was pregnant. Suddenly, the fantasy shattered. Jason, the man I thought I loved, didn't want the responsibility. He started pulling away, making excuses. And one night, he left. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. The moment. Everything changed. I sat in that tiny apartment staring at my growing belly, realizing the truth I had been running from. I had left a good man. A man who had loved me, supported me, given me a home. And now, I had nothing. No Jason, no family, no future. Just me and the child growing inside me, coming back to the man I betrayed. I don't know what was harder, leaving Daniel or coming back to him. I stood outside our old home, my heart pounding in my chest, my newborn baby in my arms. I knocked. The door opened. And there he was. His eyes widened as he took in the sight before him. Me, standing on his doorstep, holding a child that wasn't his. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. Then, Daniel did something I never expected. He stepped aside. "Come in," he said. And just like that, my past and my present collided. I had come back. But could he ever forgive me? Can a broken heart ever heal? I knew the moment the door opened, my punishment had begun. I knew that the second I looked into his eyes, I would have to face every mistake I had tried to escape. But nothing could have prepared me for the way Daniel looked at me. There was no anger, no yelling, just silence. And somehow, that hurt more. The moment of truth. He didn't speak at first. His gaze flickered from my face down to the tiny bundle in my arms. The baby stirred slightly, letting out a soft whimper. That's when Daniel finally spoke. "Whose child is that?" His voice was steady. Too steady. Like he had already braced himself for the answer. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Jason's. His jaw clenched, but his expression didn't change. Why are you here, Mia? That was the question, wasn't it? Why had I come back? Because I had nowhere else to go? Because the man I left him for had abandoned me? Because I realized too late that I had made the worst mistake of my life? I wanted to say all of that. Instead, I whispered, I didn't know where else to go. Daniel exhaled slowly. He ran a hand through his hair, the way he always did when he was thinking. Then, to my surprise, he gestured toward the couch. Sit down. I hesitated for a moment before lowering myself onto the couch, cradling my baby close to my chest. Daniel sat across from me. He didn't lean back, he didn't relax. He just watched me. Then he asked the question I had been dreading the most. Why did you leave me? The weight of my mistakes. I looked down, ashamed. I don't know, I muttered. Daniel let out a hollow laugh. Yes, you do. I squeezed my eyes shut. You left because you thought I was boring, he continued, his voice unreadable. You thought I was predictable, safe. You wanted excitement, passion. My throat tightened. Daniel, just say it. I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. I thought I wanted something more. There, I said it, but the moment those words left my lips, I wanted to take them back. Because now I knew the truth. Daniel was the something more. Jason had been nothing but a fantasy, a reckless, dangerous dream I had been too blind to see through. Daniel shook his head. And did you find it? I didn't answer, because the answer was sitting in my arms. The baby I had to raise alone because the man I had chosen over my husband had walked away without a second thought. Daniel exhaled. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. His eyes locked onto mine. Why are you really here, Mia? I hesitated, because this time I couldn't lie. Tears burned in my eyes. My voice trembled as I whispered, because I realized too late that I made the biggest mistake of my life. Daniel stared at me for a long moment. Then, to my shock, he stood up. A second chance? Or just closure? For a second, I thought he was going to tell me to leave. Instead, he surprised me. Stay here tonight. I blinked. What? You have a baby, Mia, he said simply. I may not be able to forgive you, but I won't turn you away in the middle of the night. Tears welled up in my eyes. Thank you. He nodded, but there was no warmth in his expression, just a quiet, exhausted kindness. I had come back, but that didn't mean I had a place in his life anymore. And maybe I didn't deserve one. I should have felt relieved. Daniel had let me stay. He hadn't slammed the door in my face. He hadn't told me to leave with my baby in my arms, forcing me back into the unknown. But this didn't feel like home. Because this wasn't our home anymore. I had shattered that the moment I walked away. The first night back. The guest room smelled like fresh linen and something familiar. Something that made my chest tighten with nostalgia. Had Daniel kept this room ready for me? Had he secretly hoped I would return? Or had he just never stopped loving me? I placed my baby down in the crib Daniel had quietly set up in the corner. He hadn't asked questions. Hadn't said a word as he brought out the folded blankets, the small pillow, the tiny stuffed elephant. Like he had done it before. Like he had been preparing for this moment. I wanted to ask why, but I didn't. Because what if the answer broke me more than I already was? The silence between us. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and found Daniel already making coffee. He didn't say anything as I entered, just poured a second cup and placed it on the counter, right where I used to sit every morning, back when we were still us. I hesitated before taking it. Thank you. He only nodded, taking a sip from his own mug. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unspoken. I couldn't take it anymore. "Daniel, Don't!" He cut me off, his voice calm but firm. "Not yet!" My heart pounded. "When?" He looked at me then, really looked at me. "I don't know," he admitted, "but not now." I bit my lip, nodding. He wasn't shutting me out, but he wasn't letting me in either. And maybe I deserved that. The pain of watching him move on. I spent the day watching him from a distance. He was different now. There was a sharpness in his movements, a cold efficiency in the way he spoke, in the way he carried himself. He wasn't my Daniel anymore. He was someone else, and that realization cut deeper than I expected. But the real pain came later that night, because that's when I saw her. Who is she? I had just put my baby to sleep when I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I peeked through the window, my stomach twisting. A sleek black sedan, a woman stepping out. She was beautiful, tall, elegant, confident. The kind of woman who looked like she never had to beg for a second chance. Daniel walked outside to meet her, and then he smiled. Not the small, forced politeness he had given me since I returned, but a real, genuine smile. Something inside me broke. She reached out, touching his arm lightly as they spoke. And then, before I could stop myself, I turned away. Because for the first time since I came back, I realized I might have been too late. I couldn't breathe. I stood frozen by the window, watching as Daniel talked to her, the woman who didn't carry the weight of betrayal on her shoulders. She laughed softly at something he said, and then he did something I hadn't seen in so long. He laughed too, a real, genuine laugh. My chest tightened. I thought he would always be mine. For so long, I believed Daniel would always be there, that no matter what I did, no matter how far I ran, he would be waiting for me, because Daniel was safe, because Daniel was mine. But now I wasn't so sure anymore. The woman touched his arm again, lingering for just a second longer than necessary. Daniel didn't move away. He didn't flinch. He just kept looking at her, his expression soft. The same way he used to look at me. I turned away from the window, my heart pounding. I had no right to feel this way, no right at all, and yet the thought of losing him, truly, completely losing him, made me feel like I was drowning. The hardest conversation of my life. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel smiling at her. By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I found him in the kitchen, pouring coffee like he always did, like everything was normal. But it wasn't. I swallowed hard. Who was she? Daniel didn't even blink. Her name is Olivia. Olivia. The name felt foreign in my mouth. She seemed nice, I said carefully. Daniel nodded. She is... Silence. I didn't know what I expected him to say. That she didn't mean anything? That she was just a friend? That he wasn't moving on? But he didn't give me that. Instead, he set his coffee down and finally looked at me. Mia, what do you want from me? I opened my mouth, paused. What did I want? I wanted him to forgive me. I wanted him to look at me the way he used to. I wanted to go back to before I ruined everything, but I couldn't have that. So instead, I whispered, I don't know. Daniel sighed. Then maybe you should figure it out. The reality I couldn't face. I didn't leave, not because Daniel asked me to stay, but because I couldn't. Because if I walked away now, it would mean admitting the truth that I had lost him, that I had broken the one thing I could never fix. And maybe this time, he wouldn't be waiting for me to come back. I had two choices. I could walk away and accept that I had lost Daniel forever. Or I could fight for the love I had once thrown away. But did I even deserve to fight? Did I deserve a second chance? A past that haunts me. Daniel was different now. He wasn't the man who used to wake up before me just to make my coffee the way I liked it. He wasn't the man who held me close on cold nights, whispering promises about forever. He had changed, and I hated that I was the reason why. The pain of watching him move on. Days passed, and I watched him from a distance. I saw the way he smiled when Olivia called. I saw the way his posture relaxed when he was around her. It wasn't just polite conversation. It wasn't just a distraction. It was real, and for the first time, I realized Daniel wasn't waiting for me anymore. A conversation I wasn't ready for. One evening, as I sat on the porch, Daniel stepped outside. I tensed, expecting him to ignore me, but instead, he sat down next to me, silent, thinking. Finally, he spoke. "You know, for a long time, I thought I wasn't enough for you." My breath caught in my throat. I thought maybe if I had been more exciting, if I had been the kind of man who made your heart race, you wouldn't have left. "Daniel," I whispered, guilt washing over me. "That's not true." He shook his head. But now I know it was never about me. I frowned. "What do you mean?" Daniel turned to face me, his gaze calm but firm. "You weren't looking for more, Mia. You were running from yourself." I had no words, because deep down, I knew he was right. "Is it too late?" I reached for his hand without thinking. He didn't pull away, but he didn't hold on either. Instead, he sighed. "I don't hate you, Mia. I don't think I ever could." I felt a glimmer of hope. Then maybe, but I don't love you the same way anymore. The words shattered something inside me, because I had come back hoping that love would still be there, buried under the hurt. But maybe some things, once broken, could never be put back together. I blinked back tears. "Do you love her?" Daniel hesitated. Then, softly, he said, "I think I could." I nodded, biting my lip to keep it from trembling. This was my fault. I had made this choice the day I walked away. And now, I had to live with the consequences. Even if it meant losing the one person who had ever truly loved me. Letting go of the man I love. I always thought love could survive anything. That no matter what, if two people were meant to be, they would always find their way back to each other. But standing here, looking at Daniel, the man I had once called my husband, I realized something heartbreaking. Sometimes love isn't enough. The final goodbye. The days in Daniel's house felt numbered. I could feel the shift, the slow unraveling of whatever fragile thread had been holding us together. He was kind to me. He still made an extra cup of coffee in the morning. He still checked in on the baby, made sure we were okay. But there was a distance now, a line I could never cross again. And every time I saw him with Olivia, laughing, talking, moving on, it became painfully clear. Daniel wasn't mine anymore, and he never would be again. One last conversation. That evening, I found him sitting on the porch, staring at the sky. I sat beside him, my heart pounding. "I think I should leave," I said softly. Daniel exhaled, like he had been expecting this. "Where will you go?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know, but I need to figure it out." Silence. Then he turned to me. "You could stay." Hope flickered in my chest. "Do you want me to?" Daniel looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were sad, but not because he wanted me to stay, because he knew I needed to go. "Mia," he said gently, "staying won't change the past, and it won't change how I feel." My throat tightened. "So that's it?" He gave a small, bittersweet smile. "That's it." I felt my chest cave in. But deep down, I knew this was right. Daniel deserved happiness. And I had to find mine too, even if it wasn't with him. Walking away for good. The next morning, I packed my bags. Daniel helped carry them to the car. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. No anger, no resentment, just two people who had loved each other once and had to let go. I stepped closer, pressing a soft kiss to his cheek. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" he asked. "For loving me, even when I didn't deserve it." Daniel gave me one last small smile. And then, just like that, I drove away, leaving behind the man I once thought I would love forever and stepping into the unknown, ready to finally start over. The end.